This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Raquel from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create courses for film professionals to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com or, of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Every week, we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by editor Nicole Vaskell, whose work includes Outer Banks, The People vs. O.J. Simpson, and season 2 of Bel-Air, just to name a few. Welcome to the show, Nicole.
Hey, thanks for having me, Gordon.
Now, you went to USC for you wanted to become a director, and you changed into editing. And I'm wondering, while you were at USC, was Norman Holland there? And did you have a chance to study on him and study with him? And did he sort of help change that path, or what was it like?
That's a great question. He was there. I did not take any courses with him. I had a pretty unique, I would hope to thank the students, right? Mm-hmm. And a lot of the students in my track wanted to direct. And when you're an undergrad, they only choose 4 students to make a thesis. So that kind of creates a lot of tension in the class. And I was chosen to direct. And through that process, I kind of, you're 18 years old, you think you're, directing the most incredible film of your life. And I kind of started overstepping some boundaries, really pushing the limits of what I could and couldn't do. And eventually the faculty did not like that, because I was really trying to go outside the box. Mm-hmm. And I got faced almost with expulsion from the school, and I had to get a lawyer. It was a mess. But then when that all settled down, it was about my junior year of film school, and I just focused all my courses and attention on documentary filmmaking and editing. Mm-hmm. And I realized that everything I wanted, all the joy I got out of directing, I even found more joy in editing, because when you're on set, there's a lot going on. You kind of have to control the orchestra. When you're editing, I'm alone in my editing bay, and I'm controlling my footage, my dailies, everything, and I don't have to worry about making my day, being on time. I don't have to appease to 50 other departments. I'm in my own world. And at first it felt very therapeutic for me to process that kind of traumatic experience of almost getting kicked out of school. But then, after I graduated and, started to work professionally in the field, it became a deep, deep appreciation and kind of passion for the craft of editing and filmmaking through editing. So it was through that experience, not more I wish it was a professor, but it was rather that experience that I created for myself that where I learned that, or I realized I want to be an editor.
I've been a camera person for 30 years, and I fell in love with cinema. I heard there was free film school in France, and I wanted to get into the French film school. I really didn't know anything at the time, but I knew at least how to take pictures. So I said, I'll try for the image department. And then when I miraculously got into the French film school, I fell in love with working with the camera. You're following what's going to be in the movie. So that immediacy that the camera allows is what I loved from the beginning. I'm Kirsten Johnson, and this is my course about documentary cinematography.
Now, you said you've done a lot of docs, or you like to work on docs. What is it that attracts you to the documentary format?
That's a great question, because I haven't worked on docs in a while. Basically, it's gonna sound so funny, but I love getting a ton of footage dumped on me. It's I love getting thrown in the trenches and doing that work of sifting through. It's not even sifting, because I really love watching. Hours and hours and hours and finding gold and mining for gold. I really for a lot of people it's a chore, but I really enjoy it. And I really love knowing that I need some a certain soundbite or something to happen in a story for all of it to connect. I love finding it. It's brings me so much joy, and then piecing it together. And also in documentary editing, a lot of the responsibility of writing falls on the editor. And you don't really get that a lot when you're in scripted, because there's a script, obviously. So that responsibility also is wonderful because you're more active in the creation of the story as an editor in docs. You're helping write it. You're helping put it, go through everything and find the story with the director.
Now, when I was researching for this, in an interview for Outer Banks for Cine Montage, you talked about, I guess, having rules or setting rules up for Outer Banks to sort of help you craft that story. And I'm wondering if when you're approaching projects, do you do that? Do you sort of set up guides, or do you just work with the show Bible? Like, how do you approach a show?
That's a really great question. Well, like for specifically Outer Banks, there was such a distinct tone and style already established, like season one, right? And it's such a visceral, like strong tone, like the Outer Banks vibe is its own vibe. So when I came on season 3, of course, like I'm honoring that because they did, like Jonas Pate, Josh Pate, Shannon Burke, Sunny Hodge did such an amazing job creating that world. So yes, I follow it. But in terms of my rules, like on any show I'm on, I kind of have my own approach of how I break down dailies and break down a script. Because I love working with music, and I'm very like musical when I think about everything. So I'll break down a script in terms of like, okay, here's like the plot moments, here's like the emotional soap moments, here's a montage. And I'll start thinking really, really early on of how score or songs, especially in Outer Banks, because that's such a heavy needle drop show, how I could elevate the script, how I could elevate the story, the dailies, the footage with music. So those are kind of like my rules I go into on any show. And to me, Outer Banks was so lovely to do that because that's already what they were doing. They were really elevating stories through music. So it was such a great show to be a part of.
No,
I could just go ahead.
Sorry. Well, I was gonna say with like shows that are heavy needle drop, like when you approach them, like most editors I've talked to, or I would say actually most of the older editors I've talked to would say that they don't like to cut with music; they turn it off, and then they add the music and they sort of work with it. And I found that a lot of the younger editors are like, no, I just start with the music and I start to craft it. How do you like to approach it?
Totally, that's a great question. When I first started cutting, like when I first got my first opportunity after I got bumped from assisting, I had to put like the score in early on. And I think I might have used it as a crutch early on. And then as I continued cutting and getting more experience and feeling more confident in my decision and more confident in my abilities, I started doing that less. Like, okay, I'll cut the scenes, have the scenes, and then I'll play with music, knowing that I have an idea of what this is. It really just depends. I would say more so now I'll finish crafting my scenes or my montages without score or songs, and then I'll put them in afterwards because I'm trusting my gut on the pacing and performances without the songs and without score. And usually what I'll do, and I know older editors do this as well, is after I finish cutting a scene, I'll stand up kind of far away from my playback monitor. I'll turn off all sound, even the dialogue, and I'll watch it play visually just to see if the pacing's working. Then I'll do it again, but I won't look at the screen. I'll just listen to the dialogue just to hear it, and then I'll start playing with music. But in terms of like when I'm putting my whole cut together, I'll put my score and my songs in really early. Like I'll put them in after I finish cutting a scene, as opposed to when I'm working in a bigger assembly, if that makes sense. Just because I'm so excited by it. I want to see, because, when you put in music, like, oh man, this is awesome. This is so exciting. Or like, this doesn't work. I got to go back to square one. But so it's kind of in the middle.
That's so interesting that like, so earlier in your career, you used it more as a crutch, as you're saying, but I'm wondering like, what are some things that you've noticed have changed in your approach to editing in terms of, and maybe this isn't even a really good question, but like,
yeah.
Like when you said that, I was thinking like, I wonder how you've evolved as an editor. Like, have you noticed, your approach to cuts differently, or your approach to scenes or dialogue differently? Like, how have you evolved as an editor?
Totally. It's a really good question. I think I learned a lot on this show called The Resident, medical drama, and Amy Holden Jones was our show creator and one of our showrunners, and she used to be an editor. I think she was like Hal Ashby's editor. She's an incredible, smart writer and woman, and I learned a lot from her as when we were working together when I was cutting. But I'd say my biggest, so that was like one big evolution of like, she was just incredible. Just as a mentor, not even, she didn't have to be my mentor. She was like my show creator, but it worked out as a mentorship almost. But to digress, when I gave birth to my son like 4.5 years ago. And when I became a mother, I felt like that was my biggest kind of upgrade in terms of my evolution as an editor, because I was able to slow down and kind of feel empathy more, you know, and be more and source more empathy through when I'm crafting my scenes, and really slowing down and making sure characters are connecting and the pacing is feeling right. There's just something that clicked. And it's just a confidence also, and a perspective shift. Like, work doesn't matter. It's like, I have a kid now. And when that like pressure kind of shifted, I think it allowed me to relax more in editing and just don't force things, and kind of really listen to what the dailies are telling me. And yeah, I mean, it sounds crazy when I say it out loud, but that's really when it happened, about like 4.5, 5 years ago.
Okay, so I have to ask, with COVID, you were probably you might have been working at home, you might, because you have an office, but did you find, because I just know when my daughter would just like come in and be like, what's going on, and like trying to figure out what I'm doing on the computer. So like, was that happening to you, and how did you keep focused in that situation?
Totally. Well, it's hard. So like, luckily he's in preschool now, so I have like a really good chunk from like 9 a.m. to like 4 p.m. And then it's interesting, as I evolved as an editor, I also got faster, right? So I could cut more in a shorter period of time, but the quality still was high, right? And so I was able to, you know, when I always try and craft a couple hours when he's home to family time, and do that work-life balance. And since COVID, I've been fully remote, which I really love, because I don't know if I don't like commuting to work, like spending like 3 hours in a car. But yeah, at times it's tricky to balance. I hear a phone ringing right now. At times it's tricky to balance, because they run up, but like, luckily I've worked like my team on Outer Banks, my team on Bel-Air, they all have families, they all get it, and they've all been super supportive and gracious, and it's worked out well, because I get to see my child and work. You know, I actually like it. You know, I really do like it.
Now you talked about, or you mentioned Bel-Air there, so like, did you watch the original series of
Totally, yeah.
Okay, and so how do you do you need to separate yourself from the original in your head? Like, how do you approach that? Because I think about, you know, like the basketball scenes and dealing with his dad and all these issues, and I immediately start thinking about, you know, Will Smith and the original, and like there's a comparison in my head. So do you need to like separate yourself? Like, how do you approach that when you're cutting?
That's a great question, Gordon. Like, the approach, obviously the remake, the approach is so different than the original, and my just base level like filmmaking sensibilities gravitate more so towards the remake. Like, I like gritty dramas, you know, I like elevating stories through like cinematic moments or with music. And so I was like immediately able to just compartmentalize, and like the you know, the sitcoms here and then the remakes here, and I didn't, you know, it was just like a switch. So really, I wasn't really getting tripped up by, you know, the original Will Smith version at all. Yeah, luckily.
Now, is there a particular scene or moment in the episodes you've cut that you're really proud of, but was really difficult to sort of get to in Bel-Air?
In Bel-Air or Outer Banks? Bel-Air?
Yeah, Bel-Air, yeah.
You know what I was most surprised in, and what I liked cutting the most, like overall, and then I'll pinpoint a scene, was the way that they dealt with Carlton's character in the remake, and his anxiety and his addiction to drugs, and how grounded it was, but also how kind of like psychological they approached it. And so in an early episode in 203, where Will and Carlton are supposed to leave the school the BSU on a huge like walkout because they fired a Black teacher. Carlton, he's at a crossroads because if he leads this walkout, he's like gonna get, this teacher is supposed to nominate him for this big award, and he's a go-getter, he's a good doer. So he's really nervous, and that spikes his anxiety. So there's this great moment or great sequence where they've walked out, they're about to do the protest, and he's looking around and you see his anxiety building. They shot it slow-mo. So I was going in and out of 48 to 24 frames, starting to bubble him, meaning that I was taking the sound design and like verbing it out, in and out, going close on his face, sucking all the sound out until he has a full-blown panic attack. And Will snaps him out of it. And that was really amazing to cut, because I think that was the first opportunity on the show where I was able to like flex a little bit and use like sound design and slow-mo and juxtaposition and cutting and pacing and slowing it up and down to really highlight a character's emotional state. And then what was great about that is right when Will snaps him out of it and talks to him, we jump off into this fun montage with this great song that takes us through the protest. And it was just a really awesome moment of feeling the tension, and then this really celebratory moment. So that was like really, and that was like, yeah, one of the first things I cut. That was wonderful. Michael Weaver directed that episode, and he did a great job. He used to be DP, now he's a great director. He just captured just perfect moments for me to cut with. It was really awesome.
What's interesting is you talk about the psychology and dealing with the sort of the inner monologues of these characters, essentially, or how they're thinking. So, whenever I talk to students and stuff, they're always like, what books do I have to read for editing? But what I found is, like some of the top editors I've talked to, they'll read the, in the blink of an eye and what have you, but they'll look for other books outside of that to help sort of give them more of an understanding of the characters or what have you. Is there something that you've discovered outside of editing books that you found really helped you as an editor?
I mean, music is like my biggest inspiration. I would say like songs I listen to just not like, I'm a very visual person, but I'm a visual person through auditory experiences. So like I'll hear things and then like I'll just like without even closing my eyes, I could see like what I want the music to be like in a scene, almost like a music video. And from a young age, I've always been like that, just obsessed with like, oh man, this song, this moment, and not even like songs with lyrics, like just instrumental stuff. Like, wow, this would be a great moment for like a small girl walking through a forest and the trees are going around her. Just like, so basically that's my biggest source of inspiration, because with music, like a song has arcs and it has like an intro and it has a bridge and it has a hook, and all that stuff just to me is editing, it's pacing, it's rhythm, it's taking you through kind of like a roller coaster or something. So that inspires me a lot. And then other like, I mean, the whole before sunset, before sunrise, after, before midnight, that trilogy really inspired me. I watched that. I think the first one I watched when I was like 10 or 12, and just the editing in that, the naturalism, that's something I'm really drawn to. It's naturalism, but then heightening it through like music, or I know the Outer Banks does so well, which I love. But that's where I usually get my inspiration. When I'm reading books, the visuals don't like, I'm not inspired as much visually. It's music that inspires me more visually and what I get excited about when cutting.
Okay, so what is the song right now that you're really enjoying because it gives you a unique visual experience?
Can I tell you right now? I gotta look it up on my phone. Yeah. Cool. And you know what? Hang on, I have a shortcut because I just put it on the Spotify playlist because Josh Pate, who's one of the creators and showrunners of Outer Banks, he puts together these incredible playlists every season. He just put together the playlist for season 4. And let me tell you the song I added onto it. It's called Aida, Aida, and it's by Ninad Jelik.
Okay. What do you see when you hear it?
What do I see when I hear it? I get reminded of the war in Ukraine because my parents are from Ukraine, and I just see like I see like the beautiful, like the beauty that comes out of the terror.
Mhm.
And I just see a lot of like rivers coming together, and a lot of the farms.
Yeah.
But it tells me a story. Every time I hear it, I hear a different story. But the story that comes from it is always something about has to do with Ukraine. It's yeah. I mean, it's something very personal. It's hard
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
talk
Sorry,
about. But,
yeah.
No, it's all right. It's all right.
Well,
But
you talked about Outer Banks, so you brought it up. So, like,
yeah,
is season 4 gonna, because it has that documentary style? I think it was shot with 3 or 4 cameras and a lot of ad-libbing. Is it still continuing that style
yeah,
this
totally,
season? So,
definitely.
how do you? Because if they're shooting multicam, I guess it helps a bit. But like, I find that ad-libbing is really difficult in terms of story, molding the story. So, how do you approach a scene with lots of ad-libbing?
That's a great question. So basically, with like a lot of footage and options, I get a
Mhm.
freedom to interpret the essence of the scene and create something new from it, right? And like JJ is like the king of ad libs. He could do like 20 different jokes, and the jokes aren't even in the script. He'll just like they have fun with it. And so I'll put my favorite in there, right? And then when
Mhm.
I'm working first with Sunny Hodge, who she's a producer who's a supervising editor. So I'll work with her first. We'll get the kind of good shape, then we'll start present it to our EPs after I've worked with the director. But basically, I'll make sure I have all my ad libs like strung out, and I'll play them, because even if like we all think the one I chose is the best, like we got to listen to all of them because it's fun. Like a lot because the characters and the actors do such great things. It's fun to just like review it all, and then sometimes I don't pick the funniest one, and
Mhm.
but it's a responsibility to show the guys what's there, you know.
Yeah. Now, I have one last question for you. What would you say is your favorite guilty pleasure film or TV show to watch?
I don't know if I'm butchering the title, but The Great British Bake Off,
Ah, that's a great one. Yeah, that's the
right?
title. So
That's the
now,
title. Great.
do you watch the spin-off? So like the Canadian
I
one, the
tried.
Australian, and the
I tried, but it's not the same. It's like even when they do the holiday versions of the Great British Bake Off, it's not the same.
really, which country did you try?
Um, I don't think I tried the countries. I think I just tried to have like a patisserie, like a pastry
Okay.
one.
Yeah.
And then I tried the holiday spin-off. And then because I
Yeah,
didn't
it's
even
not the
try the
same.
other country, it's not the same.
Well, okay, are you a fan of Schitt's Creek?
You know what? I have never seen
Okay,
it.
because I was gonna say, in Canada, Dan Levy, the guy who wrote all of Schitt's Creek and starred in it, um, he while he was creating Schitt's Creek before it aired, he did the Canadian one as the comedy person.
Oh,
And so,
really?
like, if you're a fan of him, then you go and watch the first couple of seasons because it's him riffing on people.
What's it called? The Great
It's
Canadian Bake
Great
Off?
Canadian Bake Off. Yeah, it's just the exact
Great,
same model, just in Canada.
great.
So, and that's it for this week, everyone. Make sure to check us out at filmmakeru.com, or of course on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. This video is made possible by our sponsors, AJA. We'd like to thank AJA for all their support and tell you to go to aja.com for all your production and post-production needs.